define because it's not dance, it's not theater, it's a hybrid art form that lies in between the two. So it is often referred to as Butoh dance. You are a Butoh dancer, or you are dancing Butoh. But it's not dance in the normal way that we think of step, ball change, 1, 2, 3, leap off the earth, spin, and so forth.
Or pretty.
Or pretty, yes. Butoh seeks to find the beauty in the dark side. And that dark side of human nature, I think, or at least for me, is, for example, we all, or most of us, would consider a rose as being beautiful, or a flower as being beautiful. But Butoh looks at a weed, and we'll say, that's a very beautiful weed. It has a deep connection to a Japanese aesthetic called wabi-sabi, which is another hard term to define in English, but the closest I could get to wabi-sabi is something that gains value through attrition, or through the wearing away of time and much loved use. For example, the coat of an old man or a family relative, an article of clothing, a graying fence post as having an aesthetic beauty as opposed to a brand new one you just got at the Home Depot. So it's that kind of thing that we look for in Butoh, that kind of beauty. It's also a beauty in an old fisherman mending his net and only conscious of the action of fixing the tear in the fishing net, and perhaps his face is lined like the net. In Butoh, the depth of the performance often increases with the depth of experience of the performer. So in other words, in most Western dance, your dancers are shipped out to pasture in their late 30s, early 40s because their knees are weak, or they can't leap quite so high, or their physical instrument is just not able to go on. In Butoh, some of the most wonderful performers are in their 50s, 60s, and even up into their 90s, as the still living and functioning Kazuo Ono is a great example of it. And he was somebody, to me, that would be a staggering old weed with a withered body that is beautiful, because he was so full of soulfulness through his experience that comes through. And I think Japan as a country and as a culture has more respect for the elderly than we do in the West. We tend to immediately think of, facelifts or extra makeup or softer lighting or whatever, once we start to get like me, a little bit craggy. So in Japan, for example, the elderly just in the culture are respected as being very wise and having a lot to teach the younger people. So I found that to be really interesting, especially that I'm, post 50 years old, is that I'm able to think I can grow like a flower. In the No theater, they talk about the concept of the flower. And the flower has many stages. The bud is like the young, fiery teenager or colt, and then as the flower matures and it blossoms, it has a beauty. But it's also very beautiful in its death as it declines and droops and begins to fall. And that's the beauty that Butoh seeks to tap. hybrid art form, meaning that its roots, it is borrowed freely from many different cultures. It came from, it was formed in 1959 by modern dancers in Japan, Tatsumi Hijikata and Kazuo Ono, and they were dissatisfied with the westernization of the arts in Japan, and they wanted to find an authentic, more primitive form that spoke to their view of the culture. So the Butoh that they did was almost, in some aspects, a very mocking element of kabuki. They took the white makeup of kabuki and they used that to sort of neutralize the body so that the performer is not an individual, but the performer becomes an everyman, meaning every man or woman. And so then the performer is able to give and receive impulses, nuances, expressions that aren't normal, that might normally not be presented. For example, kabuki has a very codified language, as does no. And Butoh is free, but yet it has its own vocabulary. And its vocabulary of movement is earthbound, and it's done very slow. So that it's transformational, very slow, very earthbound. It has the bent legs, and the bent legs come from two places. They come from, in kabuki, when the actors walk, rather in no, and somewhat in kabuki, the actors will walk with a shuffled bent leg step, and the kimono doesn't show the leg movement, so they have a ghost-like drifting of the body as they move across the stage. So Butoh borrowed this style of movement from, or just the style of walking, from no. It also took elements from German expressionism, which came from Mary Wigman and a dancer named Harold Kreutzberg. And these two performers were pioneers in modern dance in Japan and in the 40s and 30s. And Butoh borrowed from that too. So it also borrowed from Dada and the Surrealists, from Salvador Dali, and elements of rock and roll and revolution were in it.
So what was it about Butoh that turned you on?
Oh, I think it was the depth of it, the intensity of it. It really struck me as having, on the one hand, a tremendous amount of freedom, and yet being incredibly focused and intense and right there in the ever-changing here and now moment. So that struck me from the structured world of mime that I'd come from, where I could do every piece the same every night, depending on the setting. And that happened many times. Basically, for many, many years I toured, and I would always be as involved as I could. I was an intense performer, but I found that Butoh let me go to new areas that I didn't realize were available to me, prior to studying Butoh and learning about it.
Mm-hmm. What do you feel is it that you bring to this art form?
My Butoh tends to be very emotional. I use the face a lot, but not in the sense of to create an effect by making some kind of extremely contorted face. It just responds that way to my emotions. So if I'm sad, I will have a very sad face. My body is fine-tuned, I think, from all the years of that work to respond to what I'm feeling. And so, Butoh does not try to create an effect. It is just done and allows emotions and feelings to happen.
What is it that you're thinking about when you are, in fact, performing or even rehearsing?
I try not to think about anything in particular. I like to have a loose structure and make a series of leaps as the performance goes on within the context of the theme. So for example, I might begin feeling sadness, and the sadness then could create an image. So I'll allow visual pictures to come into my mind and leap. And so I'll make the leap of, what am I sad about? And then maybe just the body will feel like looking up. And when I look up, I'll try to stay open so that the subconscious can let imagery in. So some of the stimuli for the piece will come spontaneously from the lighting, from the sound, from the music that is happening, and others will come from within. So it's not just from within and you let it out, or you're a blank slate and you bring it in, it's both.